Good morning, everyone. I'm Isabelle Wilson, the president of Easton Chamber of Commerce. For those who do not know me, if I haven't spoken to you personally, please grab me at some point. I'm always happy to chat. So first of all, I wanted to thank you all for coming here this morning. I want to thank Stephanie and Lisa for putting together this great event, and for our chamber members, All Town Fresh, for bringing along the catering for us. Anytime we do meetings, we always like to support our members. So we like to bring along products so as you can then see what great members we have in our Chamber of Commerce. So today really is an opportunity to hear from the Economic Development Council and from Amy. Tell us a little bit about what's going on in the town, and then we're going to have a panel to ask questions and hear a little bit more about what's going on in Easton generally. Okay, so I'm going to pass you over to Mark, and he's going to introduce our guest speaker.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Mark Lamb. I am a member of the Select Board as well as Chair of Economic Development. As Isabelle had mentioned, we have Amy here who is going to talk about tourism in Easton. Following that, we will talk a little bit more about the economic development of the town, myself, Connor, Dottie, Stephanie, and we'll answer any questions and back and forth. But for right now, I'm going to hand it over to Amy.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Amy Rodriguez. I am the liaison to the Easton Shoveltown Cultural District. Thank you for having me. Thank you to the Economic Development Council and to the Chamber of Commerce. I am happy to see so many of the people that I've been able to get to work with in the last 8 months since I've been in the role. So thank you for coming and supporting the Cultural District. When I'm not here, when I'm not working in the Cultural District, I am the cruise director for my family. I have lived in Easton for 17 years. I live on Columbus Ave, very close to the Peach, which is my second home, my Cape House. And I have 10-year-old twins, and I'm a hockey mom. I am on the board of the NRT as well as on the Easton's Affordable Housing Trust. So when I'm not doing all that, I'm happily in my garden. So thank you all for coming, though. I've learned so much about cultural districts in the last 8 months. And I confess that I didn't know much about cultural districts before I took the job. So I'm happy to share them because I really do think that having a cultural district here in the town is a tremendous asset, and that we are all really fortunate to have one. So cultural districts, by definition, are a compact, walkable geographical area with a concentration of cultural activities. It's a hub of culture. It's been described as an anchor of attraction. So, you know, you're able to easily walk, stroll into an art gallery, dine, shop, play, take a class, take in a concert, do all these things easily and happily, so, you know, it derived out of legislation back in 2011, and Easton's had a cultural district for 6 years. And the purpose of the legislation was to promote the arts, but also to spur economic growth and to local economies in local towns. So there's only 55 in the state. So I say only because there's about 350 cities and towns in the state. So not everyone has one. It's a bit of an arduous process. It probably took years, I think. Someone else can speak to that, but I think it took many years of strategic planning, cultural planning, marketing planning, and it's all designated through the state. So it's quite a process. And like I said, we've had the cultural district for 6 years now. So Mass Cultural Council is a state agency that designates cultural districts, and they support us. We're eligible for state grants and marketing and promotion and strategic planning support. So, the state is really, pouring funds into local economies in order to foster the arts and, boost economic development here in local towns. So, I think in the last, 4 or 5 months, between Dottie and I, we've had at least 3 or 4, maybe she's had more inquiries from local towns asking about the process, asking, how to go about doing it, certain challenges, things like that. So a lot of towns don't have them, and a lot of towns want them. So we're very lucky, I think, as I said, very fortunate to have one. So the Easton Shoveltown Cultural District is the 36th cultural district. Technically, the boundaries of it overlay the historic district, one of our historic districts. We have 4. I'd like to think of it as between the library and Langwater. Unity Church, the Governor Ames Estate, Langwater, the NRT. We have a few satellite sites, Frothingham Hall, Frothingham Park, and all of those organizations and businesses in that area. Oaks Ames Memorial Hall certainly is a National Historic Landmark. It's an anchor. The library. So it's really that whole geographical area. I'd like to say there are 2 things that I think that are unique for the Shoveltown Cultural District. One is that we are in the southeast region of cultural districts, and we're somewhat alone in the area. The closest to the west is in Franklin, and closest to the east is the coastal communities, New Bedford, Fall River, Plymouth, Situate, and the Cape and Islands. So all coastal communities, all just a little bit different. So here we are kind of in this area. Sharon doesn't have one, Brockton doesn't have one, but Easton does. The other thing is that we have a very broad range of cultural activities. A lot of them sometimes have their claim to fame, they're small areas, but we have a very broad range. We have certainly the rich history of the Ames family and the shovel manufacturing history. We also have, the H.H. Richardson and Frederick Law Olmsted architecture, famed architecture here. We have a very rich agricultural history that I think is represented very well with Langwater Farm as well as the NRT. We have open space. We have wonderful boutique shops that are all sort of creative in their, in their retail, and they offer workshops. We have culinary partners. We have an award-winning library. So, we really do have a very broad range of activities, and what that does, of course, is bring a broad range of visitors and, people that might come for the food, but they might stay, to listen to music or to head over to the brewery or, something while they're in the area. So we're lucky in that regard. So the cultural district is managed by a volunteer board, management partnership team. There's 10, they're made up of business leaders and artists and volunteers, and that meet once a month. It's a town board, and they meet more than once a month, really. For the last 6 months, I think we've really been meeting a lot more, and we've been very busy. Certainly, you've hopefully all heard of the summer concert series, and we're able to go to at least one of them, and that culminated in last Sunday, our very, very successful end of summer music festival. So I am their support staff, so I am sort of the go-between between the management partnership team, the town, the state. I do the grant applications and reports, and generally, promote and support the cultural district in any way that I can in a part-time basis. But so we are just coming off of the summer concert series. I believe this is our 3rd in a row. When we weren't planning that, we published a newsletter. We've worked very closely with the art gallery that is at 50 Main Street. They're also a town board, and they meet once a month as well. And we try to support them. They were at the Langwater Art Fair. We've had the House of Possibilities, which is a organization over on Washington Street for people with developmental challenges. They've come to the art gallery to tour with their art class. And both of them, all the artists were very inspired to meet each other and talk about their craft. And then I believe that art class was also able to display their work at the library. So it's connecting, it's promoting, and trying to put people in touch with the right people to foster the arts and, bring people out. So other cultural districts, I'll just say, it's really amazing. It runs the gamut as far as what they do. And we have a cultural district check-in with the state, and I had one on Tuesday. It's great. All the representatives from the 55 cultural districts are there, and we can hear what they're doing. And it's, festivals, certainly a lot of festivals. Oyster Fest in Wellfleet is coming up. But it's also small things that they do to interact with local businesses and organizations. Someone's having a pumpkin people display with a scavenger hunt and a map so that, people can go and check out the displays. And get people moving around and meeting and visiting the shops and the areas, the galleries and things like that in the cultural district. So it really runs the gamut. One thing that a lot of them do is Porch Fest. I don't know if anyone's seen this, but it's basically residents that will lend out their porch or their garage on a Sunday, and local musicians and bands will play on the porch, and anybody in the neighborhood, right, they'll hear the music, and of course it attracts them all, and brings them there to enjoy on a Sunday afternoon. So the benefits of a cultural district, I think I've touched upon them, and I certainly feel that I can use the Summer Music Festival as a perfect example, the essence of a cultural district. It's attraction, right? It's this anchor of attraction where it brings people to the area. So it's visitation, it's visibility, right? Could be just in signage or promotion, marketing, online marketing. We did all that. We had sponsors and promoted them that way. But it's, really bringing people to the district so that they can walk around. And if they come to the Farmer's Daughter and they hear free, music down the street and it's a free event, well, then they're going to stroll down. The Wild Dahlia was open, and she flower bombed the front of her store and had so many visitors on Sunday. She told me afterwards that, and so many people that will say to her, and we've said to us, I've always wanted to go in there, but never really had the chance to, pop in, and that was their chance. And she had so many people that saw that she's not just a flower shop, but she's actually a retail shop with some really cool local gifts. And so that brought people there, and, they were able to discover, and hopefully next time that they need a gift, they'll pop in and get the gift. Or same thing with Paint, Rust, and Pixie Dust. Auntie Zaza's, they were open with a really great hands-on activity with Lindigo, which is the organization that supports the Love for Lindley Foundation here in Easton. So, that was great. We were super excited that the Historical Society had an open house as well, because I heard that they had, a lot of visitors and just people, discovering the museum. And, that's really what it's all about. Obviously job growth, economic, business development, all of those things are benefits of the cultural district. And it's, I don't think Mass Cultural Council, it makes us eligible for state grants. And so this is, the cultural and creative economy that is funneling down into local economies. And it's here, for us to partake in and really reap the benefits of it. So local businesses, there's an impact to them, and that's really what it's all about. So I think, I would love it if you all would, certainly I hope you've all come to an event, but keep us in mind, and, like and follow us. We're on Facebook and Instagram. That way you know what we're doing. And, we'd love to see you at our events. And, certainly if you have an idea, big or small, please reach out to me. We'd love to work with you all. We have, tried to, we certainly work with the businesses within the district. But for these events, we have no problem, working with others outside of the district. The boundaries, I don't really get bogged down in the boundaries. Mass Cultural Council has made it clear not to get bogged down in the boundaries of a cultural district, that it's a really good thing for everyone to work with businesses and organizations outside of the district, because that just brings more people, and it brings their, it might be a new business, might be a BIPOC business, it might be a minority-owned business that we can bring in and really, spread the word, right, and widen our audience and get more people here into the district. So I'm happy to take any questions, and thank you all for having me here. Yeah, I'm good.
Connor.
What events does the district have in mind coming up in the next 6 months, heading into fall and winter?
Right. So just coming off of the Summer Music Festival, I think we all, we have a meeting next week. And so I think we'll certainly talk about, the feedback from it, which has all been very, very positive. So, and, think about the next year. So in the past, the Cultural District has sponsored the Legacy Festival at the Governor Ames Estate. I think the last time was in 2019, so COVID, it didn't happen for that. So I think that will be their decision to decide if this is, if that's what we want to focus on, which is typically in June. But we are always looking to promote and sponsor other events in the district. And so, we've promoted, library talks and, the House of Possibilities. And, I know the Lions Festival is coming up. So we're really looking forward to working with other groups and organizations to promote their events in the district. We had a stakeholder breakfast last February. We'll probably have that as well to bring other people and, to bring the stakeholders together. And, you just generally get the information out about the Cultural District. But I think next week's meeting will probably give us a sense as to, are we focusing on Legacy Festival, for June. So, yeah.
Amy, how are you promoting the events in the Cultural District outside of Easton and more broadly?
Well, so we have, right, and so inside of Easton, it's, the town crier, it's social media, and outside of Easton as well. So I promote it on some of the regional sites, event sites, Who Fish. So Mass Office of Travel and Tourism is actually now revamping their website. So I submitted my Cultural District blurb. They have an actual page on it, but we just heard on Tuesday that they're kind of revamping it because it's not, it wasn't immediate, right? So they are working on that. I actually attended an event, a webinar actually a couple weeks ago for Mass Office of Travel and Tourism, and they've done a lot, and they're really trying to boost tourism, especially after the pandemic. And so their social media has been really wonderful. And so that was the webinar. It's been about how to boost your social media account. And it's really amazing because it's, you're competing for people's seconds, right? The scrolling, they're just scrolling. And so that's very interesting and very helpful that Mass Office of Travel and Tourism is kind of reaching out to, the local communities. And so so I've reached out to them. Certainly the state, Mass Cultural Council, will promote as well. And I can tell all the other cultural districts. One of them is actually hoping to do a bus field trip to other cultural districts. She's from Harwich. So, I invite them, please come. We're not far. And, so it's both local, state, social media, and then, like I said, some regional, like Who Fish and the Patriot Ledger and those, somewhat regional media outlets that we can tap into. But it is, it is a challenge, right? We're always trying to widen our audience. It's a challenge for every board, committee, organization, business, right? It's how do we break out of the, the local and try to bring people in. I've reached out to Sharon Cultural Council, has been very supportive and have, highlighted a lot of our events all summer. There's a Brockton Arts organization that I posted on as well. It's just getting the word out. And then I think also when we use businesses from other towns, right? We had a shave ice startup business that came, right? A truck, they're out of Brockton. That widens the audience, right? Using businesses outside of the district as well. So we're happy to do both. We're happy to have the stakeholders open and ready.
Just a real quick follow-up. Do you have flyers or things that you make available to the local businesses so they can help advertise events?
Yes. So the committee right? We have a marketing person, Pam Borblay. She's wonderful, and she creates these beautiful marketing pieces. And so she did that we printed them, and then we bring them to all the stakeholders. They put them up. We had the DPW sign at least for our summer concert series, which was fantastic, on Depot Street, which was new. So all the stakeholders get them, town hall, so we try to really reach everyone as best we can. So we do print and social media, and the newsletter, Town Crier. And if anyone has any suggestions, we also are very happy to hear from local businesses about what you're doing. I pretty much pull from social media as far as what's going on in order to make our newsletter, but it would be really wonderful if you had something going on.
Hello, good morning. Most of you know that I don't really need a mic, but this is for ECAT purposes. So, good morning, everyone. I'm Isabelle Wilson, the president of Easton Chamber of Commerce. For those who do not know me, if I haven't spoken to you personally, please grab me at some point. I'm always happy to chat. So first of all, I wanted to thank you all for coming here this morning. I want to thank Stephanie and Lisa for putting together this great event, and for our chamber members, All Town Fresh, for more about what's going on in Easton generally. Okay, so I'm going to pass you over to Mark, and he's going to introduce our guest speaker.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Mark Lamb. I am a member of the Select Board as well as Chair of Economic Development. As Isabelle had mentioned, we have Amy here. A lot of you know this, so it might be hitting on some things that you already know. But many years ago, we identified we had 3 areas in town that would be essential to the financial success of Easton's future. And those 3 economic areas were downtown, Queset, which is Washington Street, as well as Five Corners. And over these years, we have invested, developed sewer infrastructure, and the goal behind that was to bring in commercial, residential, mixed-use development, and have those areas grow as you've seen them grow, and be redeveloped as you've seen them redeveloped. And we have had sewer put in all those areas, and the areas are continuing to grow. And the future of Easton's financial success is greatly dependent upon that success, our economic success. So some points about, downtown, if you were here 20 years ago, it looks vastly different than it does now. We have, it's a vibrant area. If you look around the buildings that we're in, Oaks, Ames, the downtown area, even the streets, the lights, the development, there's still some development needed in there. And we have sewer. And it's become kind of a tourist attraction, not tourist attraction, but a attraction for restaurants, for walking, for strolls, Governor Ames Estate. And then we also have in the Furnace Village District going on right now, we have, I'm going to read some notes here because I want to make sure I get the numbers right, and correct me if I'm wrong. We have 80 units of housing, including upscale, that's been permitted right now, including moderate-sized single houses, 2-family condominiums, 24 units of multi-family housing will or shortly be under construction, several long vacant properties in that area. And this is the area that's pretty much between the Big Y and Five Corners. So several long vacant properties have been reactivated. Permits have been put in place. And we have a mixed use coming on where it's first floor commercial, or the process has begun, first floor commercial, second floor, more units. So that's what's going on at Five Corners, and there's a lot more to come down there as well. And then over at Queset, just recently, we received invitations for a groundbreaking for a Volkswagen dealership. So the exciting part about that project is, if you know the Queset area, if you know Washington Street, when you have anchors, and that is definitely an anchor, that property, Korea's Plaza, of that stretch. When you have anchors that come online and they kind of change the landscape of that area, it affects all surrounding areas. So the hope is that, once that is developed and up and running, that all areas will, follow suit and start to develop accordingly. And it's really exciting. And the Washington Street Queset just went online 2 or 3 years ago. So patience is really important in this. You don't put this development in, this infrastructure in, then flip a switch and everybody just starts to flock to. I thought that's how it worked, but it's not, as it turns out. It takes a lot of patience. So those are some, to illustrate the areas and the economic areas that start this off. I'll hand it over to Stephanie for now.
Actually, I'm going to hand it to Dottie.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to see so many people out so early in the morning with big smiles, bright-eyed, ready to go. I just wanted to make a couple of comments on the investment in our community. So Easton's been long community of investment and partnership, and I think you'll hear those words a lot as people speak through the different conversations. So what we try to do here is balance our need for open space, our historic treasures, our educational system, our business community, and really it all ties together. So a few years back, we had Barry Bluestone come in. He did some investigating into the community to help us identify what our assets are and to talk about how those are connected and how do we keep a vibrant economy and make Easton a place where people want to stay and people want to move to. So thinking about things like we have a college here. We're a college community. That brings a lot of young students that they're going to spend money in our businesses. How do we get them to know what businesses to go to? How does Easton, as an from an administrative and elected position, really support our small businesses and help them thrive and give them the tools that they need? We've done things like expedited permitting. We have a development review team that will talk with businesses when they want to come to Easton. The first person they should call is Stephanie. She pulls all this together, and we give them a game plan moving forward. And, it's really made things run a lot smoother. We try to hone and refine things based on feedback that we get from the business community and others. And we've had, a really good track record of successful projects that have been, come in ahead of schedule, under budget, by big dollars. Our most recent is the Blanche A. Ames Elementary School, which if you haven't been there, you should really try to get there. It's just incredible. It's going to serve our community well for many years ahead. Some of the other things that we have, investments take the form of appropriation of municipal funds, state and federal grant programs, CPA funding, private investment, and policy decisions. So that's just kind of like the overhead of what we're talking about, and I'm going to pass it to Connor to give us a little bit more detail on some of those programs.
Thank you, Dottie. And thank you all for being here early in the morning. I will go anywhere, but there is a coffee trailer out front, so super excited about that. What I would like to contribute to the conversation is just talking a little bit about, we've done a lot of infrastructure programs, we've expanded policy programs, but try to tie that down to why does that actually matter, both for folks in this room and the business community, but for Easton more generally. So I'm in my 7th year now as town administrator. I've been working in Easton for 12. I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of folks in this room. And I think it's important and hopefully something that we all share. And if not, I know the folks in this room will tell me the view that, the progress we've made has been through partnerships with supportive voters in the public, partners in the cultural and arts space, like the cultural district, and of course, partners in the business community. And so working with those groups, we've been able to do a lot of good in the past 10 years to position us to continue to grow and be successful in the next 10. Mark and Dottie touched on already, but 10 years ago, Easton had 0 public wastewater capacity. And that's, one of the kind of unsexiest areas of economic development, but it's actually super important that you're quite limited with what you can do if everything is on a Title V, particularly as those regulations just get harder and harder as time goes. And, now we have multiple 100,000 gallons of daily treatment capacity for businesses, for denser housing that did not exist before. And it didn't come into existence by, someone in my office saying, well, it's going to get built. These are expensive, complex, difficult projects. And we, in each of these 3 areas, we're able to work with the business community in particular leveraging state programs, whether it be 40B for Shovelworks or Avalon, or 40R with Doug at Queset, to bring in some state funds into the revenue portfolio to help offset some of those costs. Have been successful bringing in millions in state grants, particularly in Five Corners District, working with the businesses in that district, the Furnace Village Neighborhood Group, where the state has limited economic development and infrastructure dollars. And they want to know that if they're giving it to a municipality, that municipal government's working with the businesses on the ground, with the citizens on the ground. And I would say this if Neil wasn't in the room, but I don't think your average state grant administrator doesn't normally get a wastewater regional grant application with 200 letters of support from businesses and residents. But we did, and we were able to bring millions of dollars into that program and offset the cost. So we've been able to work with many of the folks in this room and in the business community to create these infrastructure programs so that we can have more economic opportunity, couple that with reform zoning to allow more density in specific targeted areas. Because something that sometimes comes up when you have conversations about development or density is a fear of change or of losing a sense of place or the character of a community. And we've been doing this long enough now that we can look back and show that we have been able to thoughtfully encourage development and density in certain areas while holding on to and elevating, I would argue, a lot of the characteristics that people associate with Easton, whether it's through arts and culture, whether it's through historic preservation. So we've done the infrastructure development, but also expanded, I guess you could call it our green space portfolio. We haven't filled in all the wetlands and built on them. We've actually acquired more permanently preserved open space at the same time. And it's not just infrastructure. We've tried to be thoughtful with our programs, and creating economic opportunity through zoning and infrastructure is important, but it's also important that we create generational opportunity for the people who live here and the children who are growing up here, for the folks who are aging in place here, because a lot of these things, in my opinion, are a two-sided sword, right? If you're and you are owning property in 2016, 17, 18, and then values go up 40%, there's some real equity that's been generated for you. But if you weren't part of that group, you were not in at that time, the flip side of that is now it's incredibly hard for folks and they're priced out. So we've also prioritized working across the town government, working with the community and of course with the schools to increase access to generational opportunity. And so during the same window of time, we have eliminated tuition for kindergarten. So now we have universal free full-day kindergarten for all children in Easton. There are hundreds and hundreds of studies that show that one of the single most impactful policy choices we can make, not just for educational attainment, but for long-term economic growth potential for us as individuals, is improving access to education, particularly early education. And we believe very strongly that regardless of the income of someone's parents, that they should have the same access to that opportunity. And now that is universally the case here in Easton, and that's a really important thing. We have much more obvious examples of investment in education. Like Dottie said, we have the Blanche James Elementary School, which was built through the pandemic. That school is a major draw for folks who want to live here, who want to patronize businesses here. You meet lots of families when you go to events now, you go to the cultural district events or you go to the ribbon cutting, who will say, I knew of Easton, but when I saw that school was happening, we moved here because that showed that this community cares. It cares about the future. And it's just been a real incredible thing to see. We've also wanted to increase kind of multi-generational opportunities for folks to enjoy living here. So Health and Community Services and CPA, Rec Commission, they've been working together quite a bit in recent years to expand our public investments where we can make them for things like pickleball court construction, improving basketball courts at the schools, new playgrounds, new programs across generations so that folks can have an active and healthy lifestyle here, to get outside, be part of a community, patronize businesses. In another area that we have prioritized, a lot of this, it's not lost on me. We've all kind of collectively lived through some hard years, particularly for the business community through COVID. There's been some real challenges for folks. And so we have, working with the schools, deliberately been investing in and improving our access for children and families and residents to mental health services, which we think is also a really important aspect that might seem a little bit out of the scope of economic development breakfast, but we really believe that it's important that we try to take care of each other and take care of our neighbors and create a healthy place. And that it obviously extends to social and emotional well-being. And so now, as of this summer, any student in our schools or anyone who lives in Easton has access to free, confidential mental health referral services, so we could connect people regardless of their insurance barriers with providers, usually in 2 to 3 weeks, which is substantially faster than most folks can get assistance. We have brought into our kind of program framework, we now have full-time a paramedic, registered nurse, who functions as our community health officer, so that what the fire department's seeing on their emergency medical runs can inform health policy in a proactive way moving forward. And we've taken that model and done the same thing with police and mental health. We now employ a full-time licensed mental health counselor so that that person can be in the community and try to provide better wraparound care services for folks to get back on their feet, and back in the community and thriving, rather than those things falling through the cracks and those folks, only getting support through, emergency response calls. So we've tried to, where we can, work with our partners in the community and business to create economic opportunity, whether that's through infrastructure or through zoning, but also to make sure that we're doing what we can to support programs so that folks who don't necessarily directly benefit from those investments, or folks who are struggling or having a hard time, also hopefully have a better shot now to participate in the the rising tide. So I know that was a lot, I didn't touch on a lot of specifics related to business, so I'm going to turn it back to Mark and Stephanie just to talk a little bit about what we've seen as far as permits for growth, business investment. So here you go, Mark.
I think this is all you, Stephanie.
Okay. So Mark started off, I thought that was a great introduction, talking about some of what you see already happening in Easton over the last 10 years. But again, a combination of the investments in infrastructure and policy changes, new modernized zoning for our target districts have really resulted in revitalization of those areas. We see it in the Northeastern Village area, along Main Street, new businesses that have now become well established are attracting people, not just locally, but from outside the area. And again, with the cultural district, I think that's another attraction that's bringing people to the downtown, which is flanked by residential, mixed use, and single family housing. And the mixed use is generally in the form of 2 and 3 family units, kind of traditional older style multifamily housing. It's very walkable. And that's a model that we're trying to replicate in the other districts. We've seen in the Furnace Village district with the new zoning there that we've had a series of permits. We have more than 80 units of housing that will be developed down there between new subdivisions and some multifamily that's both standalone and part of mixed use development. And I'm sorry, there are plans in the works for roadway improvements along Foundry Street between Depot Street and Eastman Street. So that's a TIP project, a transportation improvement project that's on the state list for funding in the future. The town is undertaking the initial design phases. That's the obligation of the town to move those type of roadway projects forward. And we have completed the pre-25% design phase, or in the process of the 25% design phase. And what will those improvements will look like will be new traffic management to help modulate and calm the traffic along that road, as well as sidewalks and a multi-use path that provide bicycle and other pedestrian access. We've got a project, please look for this, Swift's Park being proposed for the triangular piece of land that's currently just a grassed area with a couple of trees at the intersection of Foundry and Pequannock Avenue, turning that into a memorial park, recognizing the victims and first responders to the 1918 pandemic, as well as the 2020 COVID pandemic. And then we've seen some, as Mark mentioned, the corner of Depot and Washington Street is being redeveloped. It will be a state-of-the-art car dealership, and it is converting in what was an aging and falling into disrepair old strip mall that was underutilized and will help spark new development in that area. Connor, do you want me to? Yeah. Start with the.
So to get into just a couple of specifics of what some of these programs have looked like, in the past 10 years, we've had 66 businesses, either new businesses develop, expand, or upgrade their existing footprint in Easton. This ranges from restaurant to medical, manufacturing, retail. They constitute about $90 million of property value to the community, well over $1 million in annual tax revenue, which is really important. Not to sound like the tax man, but that this is how we pay for services and reinvest in infrastructure. What we have in play right now, we have approximately 11 businesses that are opening, in the process of opening or expanding in calendar year 2023. And to tie it back to some of what we started with, why does that matter and what does that actually look like? In the past 10 years, through these programs, through these investments, through the private investment from businesses, including many folks in this room, Easton has substantially expanded its housing opportunity. So we added 1,000 units of housing in 10 years, which sounds like a lot, and frankly, it is. More than 600 of those are multifamily. They are, some of them are affordable restricted, but importantly, for folks of all generations, we've created more diverse housing options. Being in a single family home with 4 bedrooms when you have children and you're working might make sense. And then as those kids grow up and move out and move on, that may no longer make economic sense for you. And if you love your community and you want to stay, but the only type of housing is $800,000 or $900,000 single family homes, you will be eventually faced with a choice to leave. So diversifying housing, having smaller units, rentals, has been not only important for folks just starting out, trying to start their families, but for a lot of folks who are looking to stay here as they age. The families of Easton are diversifying. So in 2010, our public school system, only 10% of students were students of color. And now that number is 25%. And so we are not only increasing the types of housing that are available from a kind of diversity of housing stock, but the community is also diversifying. And that's something that, I'll speak for myself. I think diversity in and of itself is a wonderful thing, but for everyone, it's a benefit for everyone because it increases the cultural competency of our community and of our children, so that when they grow up and are working in a globalized world and economy, they are more effective and more able to work with folks no matter their background. So that's a win-win. As we just touched on, between what's already been permitted and expanded and what's in the works, we're nearing about 80 newer expanded businesses. We've been able to sustain a reasonably strong municipal position, right? So Easton has been and will continue to be primarily, a residential community. Our financial strength, our ability to invest in infrastructure, our ability to provide programs, is really tied to the financial strength of our residential properties. And our values in Easton, both the capital V values that we're talking about, but the property values in Easton, we are outperforming all of our neighbors, including Mansfield, Sharon, Foxborough. Since 2019, single-family home values, and this is pulled from Zillow, this is not based on our assessor's database, have risen by about 35% since 2019, where the average for our neighbors is closer to the mid-20s. So we're doing almost 50% better than all of our neighbors. And those are, I'm not trying to, dunk on Mansfield. Our neighbors are great places. These are all strong and good communities to live in. But Easton is far surpassing them. So we've been able to generate that value for folks. And I'd like to think that, taken together, that this is kind of proof of concept that when we work with businesses, when we work with our residents, we can be thoughtful and leverage public and private partnerships and investment and create a community that is opening opportunity for more businesses, for more families, becoming a more inclusive community while creating programs to try to help those folks who often get left behind, and doing so without sacrificing, small town charm, without sacrificing, farming business, without sacrificing historic districts, and without sacrificing open space. And to the contrary, we've been able to do both, right? So we have more housing, we have denser housing, we have more infrastructure, but we also are spending more effort and energy than ever on arts, culture, tourism, historic preservation, open space preservation. And we have been able to do this without, again, one of these fears you will hear when you talk about, the forthcoming MBTA zoning, which we're going to get to, is that if communities allow denser housing, that it will somehow be to the detriment of the existing housing or to existing single-family home values. And we can show that's not true, not in Easton. So those folks have been able to benefit as well. I touched on this before, and now I'm going to segue back to the panel to talk about what's coming, particularly with zoning. It's not lost on us that, the growth and value for homes is great if you had one already. But there is an increasingly large number in the population, working population, that is just priced out, not just of Easton, but you can't read the paper and not read about the housing crisis and how that translates into an economic crisis for businesses because they have employees who cannot afford to live anywhere near their business. And so the state, a couple of years ago, under Governor Baker, signed into law what's called the MBTA Communities Act. It applies to communities with train stations or ones that abut them. So we don't have a station, but we're near them. And it's a mandate from the state that we, in order to confront the enormous shortage of housing available throughout Massachusetts, that the 150 so communities in this area enact zoning that allow for more density by right, not through going through long, extremely complex permitting, but by right. And so that's something that Easton is working towards, that a lot of our neighbors are working towards, that hopefully folks in this room engage in that process as that kicks off. And I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie and Mark to talk about that process.
Okay, so Connor did a really good job of introducing what the MBTA zoning is all about. One of the things I'd like to say is that the multifamily housing that exists in Easton is always occupied. You may see signs in front of Shoveltown advertising, units for lease, as well as Avalon. And when you talk to them, really what they operate at is about a 95% occupancy rate. So they always want to have units available. It's a very much needed commodity, as Connor mentioned, in the community. The MBTA zoning requirement is that a community be able to accommodate, not build. The community does not have to build it. And this is where the private investment comes in, but be able to accommodate up to a minimum of 15 units per acre within a designated district. And I'll talk more about those districts in a minute. So that a private developer can come in and, as of right, with a simple site plan review, be able to have a project permitted and move forward. The planning board, a little bit of history. So when the town was first notified, like all the towns in the Commonwealth that are MBTA communities, that this legislation required the town have such a district, the town appointed a task force to review the guidelines, to provide comments during the comment period, and to look at different parts of the town that might be suitable for this type of development. And also to agree that the town would move forward on this. The town, that committee came up with 7 potential areas. A couple of those areas were ruled out by final guidelines. And most of those areas already were where this type of housing already existed. That committee kind of took a hiatus while the guidelines were finalized. They've been finalized. Now the planning board is working on this zoning. They're focusing on 3 of the original potential districts. That's the Furnace Village district area around Eastman Street, where the Avalon complex currently exists. The zoning currently for that area allows for mixed use. It allows for multifamily. And the idea is to promote development in that area that is more like a mixed-use neighborhood development. It's close to amenities and services that people who are living in the district can avail themselves of. It is in close proximity for people who need to commute to work, to Route 495, Route 95, into Boston, south, out of town, or even within town. So that's one district that's being considered. Another one is over on Belmont and Washington Street, over by Belmont Arms, which is a multifamily complex. There are 2 buildings there that have density to the level that is required, the 15 units, and it will include a few parcels over there. And then the third is up by Roach Brothers. And again, these are all districts that are near commercial activity, amenities, services, and also where they're located next to areas that will be easy for people to get to work. So the board is in the process of starting that. But Connor mentioned, again, this is very much needed housing. This is really intended to respond to a need across the state, but also, as we've seen, a need in Easton for housing for people who just can't find the housing that they need to suit their particular stage of life and their housing needs.
You guys are doing a great job.
So I'll wrap up here. So that process is going to unfold. We have to, as a community, adopt those zoning standards by May of next year. The planning board will be putting information out about public information sessions where folks can learn more about it, understand why that mandate exists, and how we could hopefully be thoughtful about it and leverage it in a way where we're putting these kinds of units in a place that creates opportunity for folks, for your employees, to bring a customer base to you. A couple other things we're working on that are related to where we're going in the next 5 to 10 years. Health and Community Services and the Rec Commission are going to be doing a recreation master plan. So I think it has to be fun given the subject area, but taking a look at our athletic complexes and what kinds of fields do we have for our teams? Do we have the right types? Are they in the right condition? Because I'll be the first to admit, if somebody comes to town meeting and says, we don't have enough of X field, I have no idea. I have no clue how many fields of a certain type a town needs based on its size. But so we'll be working with folks in the community to find out where we're doing a good job, hopefully in some areas, and where we could do better, and have that start getting baked into our multi-year capital improvement planning, so that we continue to make Easton an attractive and vibrant place for families and for healthy families as well. And then something really large on the horizon, not directly related to economic development, but certainly related to the health of the community, is we've been working for a couple of years on the planning process to replace all police, fire, and public works facilities in Easton. Many of you business owners here, you know these folks, you know these employees. They come to your stores, they patronize your businesses, they respond to them when there's an emergency. Our police, fire, and public works facilities in town were built between World War II and before the moon landing. Got a lot of use out of them for many, many, many decades, but they're a bit tired. They are entirely too small. They were designed back when Easton's population was about 5,000 to 6,000 people. It's now about 25,000. Some of the stations we're using were being designed when horse-drawn fire apparatus was a thing, and now we can't fit any of the fire trucks in them. So we've been thinking for a couple of years, working publicly for a couple of years, on how do we most effectively replace these facilities, and we would do so with 3 new facilities: a consolidated police fire at 524 Depot Street with a consolidated public works on the same site, and then a new fire substation across from Hilliard's to service the northern portion of town. Particularly, a lot of business has been growing. There's a lot of population density increasing in the Foundry Street corridor, the southern portion of town. This would allow for a better coverage, particularly from the fire department in that area, than what we have now. And it would provide safe workplaces for the folks who come to work every day, 24 hours a day, to keep all of us and our businesses safe. So that's going to a vote this fall, October 23rd at a town meeting, and then November 4th for a debt exclusion. We have our architect in the back if anyone has questions about that. I'm available. I'm happy to talk about it. But that's another project not dissimilar to Blanche Ames or the investments we've made across the school campus, basically rebuilding the entire public school campus in the past 25 years, where just like a private sector employer, we need to remain competitive as well. And if you are, a skilled paramedic and you can get roughly the same pay regardless of a town you go to, and you can work in the case of firefighters, live in a modern, safe facility, or you could work in a fire department that has no sprinklers, which is the case in Easton, it becomes a major challenge for us to be able to recruit and retain the best and brightest, so that when one of us has to dial 911 or is having a hard day, that we have enough people and the right people to show up. So it will have a huge impact on the trajectory of the community for the next 50 years, one way or another, depending on how it goes, just like these investments in the school have. And hopefully, some of the stuff we've talked about, some of those investments in recent decades that we're seeing, hopefully are showing through for your communities as well. And I guess I'll wrap it up there and give it to Mark to be the facilitator for any questions.
Thank you, Connor. So to you guys, any questions for us? Who's first? We have Neil. Oh, there we go.
The project that you mentioned between Eastman and Depot Street, is there a timeline for when the first shovel will hit the ground? And follow-up question, will there be any land takings to put in those bike lanes and sidewalks?
So it will be 8 to 10 years out. That's the time frame, which, as you know, actually goes by very quickly. It sounds like a lot right now. And yes, we would anticipate there would be some land takings.
If I could just add a little bit to that, the goal would be much like with Depot Street. So it's the same type of project with Depot Street. We actually had 114 land takings there, but we obviously work to make sure that those are as marginal as possible. so that we're not, impacting people's ability for parking and that kind of thing. And obviously, we have to pay market value for those things. So we're not, we want to get easements on as little land as we need. But we certainly will need to in order to, have pedestrian access, and the goal there hopefully is that in the net it ends up being a positive. We'll be in a place when that happens where you will have contiguous sidewalk and multimodal transportation access all the way from Union in Washington down Washington to Langwater Farm, Elm Street, through the downtown, all of Depot Street, past our then new police, fire, public works, to the Five Corners, all the way to Target, so that folks can get around and hopefully come stop by your businesses.
Neil, I just want to make sure you were referring to the sidewalks connecting Eastman Street and Five Corners, correct? Yeah. Okay. Who else? There was another hand over here. Joan?
Just a question. I've heard what the tax effect is going to be from that municipal complex if that's approved. Do we know yet what the tax effect is going to be from the school and combined with that?
Sure. So yes, the school is complete. So when we were forecasting that out 4 years ago for voters, what we anticipated based on what the budget was that the average tax impact would be, about $450 per household per year. Thankfully, some of this is having the right people in the right place, but some of it, frankly, is just luck and timing. We locked in the construction contract for that project right before COVID, like months before COVID. And so we were able to get it done at about $15 million under budget on time. And so what we know now is that the median household of your tax bill, about $300 a year is attributable to that school. We know that obviously taxes have gone up. They go in one direction and it's up. A lot of folks hear that and say 300, but my taxes have gone up more than that. They certainly have in that time frame. And a lot of that's attributable to the values, right? Because your tax bill is a function of the rate and the value. And residential values in Easton, assessed values have gone up 10% a year each year for the past 2 years, and probably, I expect that trend to continue at least for a little bit more time. And so, the board is looking at and trying to be thoughtful with a rate shift so that commercial valuations don't increase at that speed typically. And so the board has begun shifting that a little bit, but that's a delicate economic balance because there are fewer business parcels than there are residential. And so you don't want to move that too quick and have a business have a 50% tax increase, right? So, but as far as the school, for your median house, it's about $300 per year for the new school.
First, I just wanted to thank everybody for what you've done today. Amazing work by amazing people, as always, in Easton. But it kind of brings up the fact that, many people in this town, they volunteer their time, they're on boards and committees. And Connor, you mentioned that in compared to other communities around us, how fast the growth is, and it's something to be strongly proud of. But my question is, what are the plans to accommodate for getting quality people to have actual positions in this town and to volunteer for boards and committees? The important work is really done by the people who love this place. I'm curious if there's any plan for how town government and in general, how are we going to accommodate for, you mentioned about the police and fire department, enough people and the right people? What are the plans for that, if any? Thanks.
Sure, thank you. So on the volunteer front, many of which are in the room and do a lot of incredible work. So outside of the kind of administrative operations, so town government, we employ about 160 people. About 120 of them are police, fire, public works. we rely on more than 200 volunteers across our boards and committees, including a lot of really significant and important regulatory roles from planning, zoning, and we have a lot of really great people in Easton who contribute a ton of their time to that. But it's volunteer based, right? So that's free. That's folks are not being paid. So what we have tried to do post COVID, something that the state hasn't permanently adopted. That's been extended, I think, for 2 years, every 2 years for quite a while. Eventually, I think they'll get there, is that we try to be very flexible with meeting formats for folks. So something that we've seen once public meetings could move to Zoom was that we started to get a whole lot more diversity across age, gender, race, socioeconomic background, which we think is an awesome thing. Because the reality is, if you have to go to a room like this at 7 o'clock at night and you work in the city, you just can't do it. Or if you don't have childcare, you just can't participate. And we don't want that. And some of these things, these are structural, they're baked into state law. We can't kind of hand wave them away. But so we've tried to, have that be up to each committee to make the call that makes sense for their membership on, are they meeting in person? Are they meeting online? And as hopefully a way to make that barrier for getting involved a little bit lower, because it is asking a lot of folks. As far as general recruitment and retention plans for our workforce, Easton has historically, long before I was here, but continuing, we have prioritized, I think, successfully quality over quantity. We do comparative analyses of our competitors, I guess you would call it, our neighboring communities, and very, very regularly, our departments are accomplishing their mission with fewer staff than their peers. But we try to make sure that we pay competitively to reflect that. So we do have, and I'm glad you asked this because it gives me an opportunity to make the point that we currently do have really high quality staff. Amy is one of them across the organization. And we try to prioritize that through having competitive compensation packages. And on the flip side, what we get is, we have a higher level of educational attainment typically of our employees. We have a very high level of licensure among our employees so that they could be more dynamic, flexible. And, you send Easton DPW anywhere, they're going to figure it out. They have the licenses, they have the skills. So that's where we're putting our effort.
Anybody else? No more questions? Oh, we do have another question, Mr. Morris.
Just a quick question regarding the MBTA zones for housing. I'm assuming that as part of that qualification that it has to be attached to a sewer system versus septic, because I'm not quite sure how you can get 15 residential units on an acre of land with a septic system.
So I'll answer the question. The state does not require that you have municipal sewer. They figure that the developers will figure that out. However, so 2 of the districts, actually the Furnace Village district, Eastman, is sewered and does have capacity. A portion of the proposed Belmont Washington Street appears to be on the sewer system, and Northeastern, the Roach Brother Plaza area is not on sewer.
Can I add?
But
the zoning,
again,
the zoning does not supersede the underlying restrictions.
Right.
So if a developer buys a property and it's not sewered, they still have to meet the requirements of Title V. And if they can't build it because it's not big enough or they can't get enough units in there, it just has to be zoned for it. So.
right.
So that's a really good question because we'll see. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out across the state. Because you could kind of go the malicious compliance route and just like drop your zone in the middle of the swamp. I think the state would be unhappy about that.
Actually, they have a compliance model that you have to submit your district through, and it wouldn't allow you to do that. But
But
you have.
So the short answer is no, and you're right. I mean, I'm not a Title V expert, but I'm pretty sure you can do a septic tank for 15 units an acre. And so
It would probably have to be a small, like a small treatment plant or a larger subsurface
Which is not,
system.
you know, the zoning wouldn't mandate that the town or the public pay for. That would be something, and you see that, you know, with downtown here, with, you know, Doug King's property at Queset, that wastewater, public wastewater capacity came to Easton through the expansion and overbuilding of private plants that would have had to have been built to serve that density by the developer. So.
I just want to add another thing because I've worked with the MBTA communities in my job for several years since that came out, so I have a lot of experience in it. One of the things, you know, first, every community that I've worked with, first is like, what are you talking about? This is nonsense. But once you dig into it and learn a little bit more about it, what it really does is it makes the town be proactive about where it wants the housing. And Easton has always done that since I've been on the board for 11 years-ish, is we have a housing production plan. We have a master plan. We've talked for years and generations about the kind of housing we want, to try to diversify the types of housing, where we want to put it. So this is really, we've already been doing most of this anyway. This just kind of solidifies it, and we'll meet the compliance pretty easily. So it's not anything that's going to be, you know, super different from the way we've always worked. But if we don't do this, communities that don't do it, there will be lawsuits against them. The Attorney General's office has already made statements to that effect. And this isn't something that, if the zoning is passed at town meeting, we're not going to see skyscrapers built up. There's already existing things under that zoning. So if we have zoning that's up around Target and that plaza and Avalon, we're not going to tear down Avalon you'll probably add some more in the parcels around it, or you might develop some of the parcels in, you know, a shopping center, things like that. So it's definitely something to follow the meetings and get a little bit more information about. And I think that Easton's doing a really good job. We've been proactive since it started by putting together that task force to really understand it. One of the things in the beginning is there was no affordability requirement. So here we are saying we need affordable housing, and the zoning doesn't accommodate it. Based on our feedback and other communities' feedback, they do have some things that will allow for an affordability part of that. So, you know, if we're going to be building all this housing, we want some of it to be affordable for the people that live here and want to downsize or start out here. So we have made we've been part of the impact of changes as this has been along, because we were the first ones to really get out in front of it.
And I'd just like to add, the first public outreach meeting is going to be on October 11th at 7 o'clock. It will be via Zoom. It will be an overview of what the MBTA zoning is, and then an overview of the process and the steps the town has taken so far. We have a web page under the planning board's webpage on the town website that has links to the districts that are being considered, and we'll have copies of the zoning as it's currently drafted and being considered. It's not finalized yet. As Dottie mentioned, we're not talking skyscrapers. The planning board is looking at a 4-story max in the districts. And I like that Dottie made the point that it really gives the town another opportunity to think about where they'd like to see this zoning. The town is making that determination. It's not the state that's telling you where it has to be. Some of the other communities that have transit stations, it has to be within a half mile. Because we're an adjacent community, we can select areas that it makes more sense, and it's consistent with the type of zoning and the efforts that the town has made for more multifamily housing and affordable units.
I just want to point out as well, so all this conversation, you know, on the select board, when we were reviewing this, one of my concerns was, you know, once the zoning passes, this development's going to occur. And that's really quick, and that's not the case. So this just points out the zoning. For development to actually occur in those areas, a business, the owner of that land either needs to develop it or sell it to someone who wants to develop it at an agreeable price. Then there's steps to go through. So this is not necessarily next year or in the next few years or 5 years. This is, you know, could be years and years away that it will come into fruition. This isn't tomorrow or once the zoning is passed. now we're staring down the barrel of these massive developments happening at all the same time. That is not the case, because that was my biggest concern. Any other questions? Marty, go ahead.
Just a quick question about the new municipal building projects. I understand the need and the age and so forth. I think when the school campus project was sort of sold in, which I thoroughly love, a selling point was that the first responders would be right there on campus. What is the plan for the existing police and fire station, and will there still be first responders sort of on campus?
Great question. We've gone through this a dozen times, and Connor's very well equipped on that one.
So thank you. And I've kind of read up on this because I'm not a big fan of reinventing the wheel. So a lot of the material we're working through to talk about tax impact and forecasting, I'm going back and grabbing all of our materials from 2019 from that exact project. I know that those conversations happened, but the predicate for consolidating the schools was never based on because public safety was on Lothrop Street. It's certainly nice that it's right there, but those schools were consolidated because of the same predicates with these buildings, which is that they were all antiquated, they were not up to code, they were not as safe as they ought to have been. As far as how the new project continues to make sure that we have a safe community and a safe campus for kids, one of the things that we always talk about here is, there is a police station there, but the way that police respond to emergencies is not, maybe not what folks think. The police outside of shift change are not in the station. They're in roving patrol zones, which include the schools. And so, if there's an emergency on campus, the first person who's going to get there is a patrol unit. So whether that patrol unit checks in for their shift on Lothrop Street or Depot Street, there won't be an impact to where those resources are. We do have a presence on campus every day of the week. We do have a school resource officer assigned to the public schools full time. But we also try to make sure that we're not overselling that as some kind of guarantee of security either, right? School resource officer is in different buildings, meeting with kids, meeting with teachers, but they are there and they are there full time. So that won't change. So the response model doesn't change based on where the station is. The patrol resources are still there. When there was a bomb scare last year, the first law enforcement on scene was a patrol officer, not somebody who was at the station running across the street. Even if there was, a desk officer or, the chief himself in the station, the time it would take for them to get their duty gear on, depending on the emergency, Kevlar, and get out, get in a car, get across the street, they're probably not going to be there before the patrol units. So we understand that's really sensitive for folks. There's obviously really upsetting news in the area with violence at schools. But a lot of the folks, a lot of the principals of this project, we live here, our kids go to school here, police have children in these schools. And we have worked really deliberately with police, fire, and the schools. We have more training now than ever, both in responding to safety threats, but also with medical aid. So as far as fire not being there, whether fire is at Lothrop or at Daly's Corner, I'm not going to try and blow smoke and say somehow being a mile and a half away is closer than across the street. It's not. But there are 2 RNs in every school. And so whether fire is at Lothrop or on Main Street, the first person rendering medical assistance to a child in a school will be the nurse. And the role of the fire department is to get there for a transport. We went back and looked at those numbers. Past school year, about 15 total times that ambulances had to go to the school. A lot of that is kind of statutorily required if a child needs an EpiPen or something, which again would have been provided by the nurse. So we feel very confident that there's not going to be any change to the security posture for the schools. We know that that's a sensitive thing for people to be thinking about, but we'll still have really good response times in the community for fire department who do dispatch from their stations, and for the police department, they don't get dispatched out of their station in the first place. They're in roving units. And two last things I'd like to add on that, because I think this is important. It comes up a lot. One is that we have substantially improved our response times through technology, kind of on the back end that may not be as visible. one of the things we have done in the past 10 years or more recently is we regionalized our 911 services. So now we have something called SEMREC, which is a regional dispatch center for Easton, Mansfield, Foxborough, and Norton, where a huge amount, probably 90% of 911 calls at this point originate from a cell phone, not from a landline. And until we went to SEMREC, the way that it works if you don't have a regional PSAP like this is that you call 911 in an emergency. You get bounced to state police in somewhere in the middle of the state. I'm not the best at anything outside of 495. And you have to verbally explain to them where you are, which depending on the emergency can be extremely hard, right? You're stressed, you're scared. And then they have to then route you back to the local dispatch center. Usually that was kind of tacked on to your local police department. And that was our model. That's a lot of people's model up until 2020. Now we have, and that can take time, right? Depending on the caller, you can lose 30 seconds, a minute plus. I went through that myself. I was in a community. I saw a motorcyclist get hit by a car. I called and I couldn't, it took me and the dispatcher of the state about a minute to discern where we were because I was technically in a village within a town. And so I knew the town I was in, but not the village name. Thankfully there was, it was at a festival. So there was first responders on scene. They helped the gentleman out. He made it, but we don't have that problem now in Easton. So if you call 911, SEMREC knows within about 3 feet where you are from the geolocation data on your phone. And that information is immediately being communicated to police and fire resources in Easton while they're getting the kind of qualitative and contextual information from you. So we've cut a lot of that dispatching from minutes to seconds. So we take it very seriously. We care a lot about it. And the one other thing I want to add there is that we know it's a sensitive subject. It's something on people's mind because of the state of the nation. But there is no perfect security plan. That doesn't exist. There isn't one now based on Lothrop Street being there, and there won't be one of it. We're at Depot Street. But one of the things that I think we do well here, and we want to continue investing in, I touched on a little bit talking about what we've done in the past 10 years, is that through the schools, through health, through police and fire, is that we try to be really thoughtful and deliberate in working on addressing the underlying social determinants of community violence, of despair, where we have improved access to mental health resources. We have improved communication and relationship building between first responders and the schools. The schools have an amazing guidance team for families, so that we are hopefully doing a better job catching the folks who are falling through the cracks and trying to help get them to a healthier place, so that we don't have people in such an upset or hopeless place where they would consider an act of violence against their neighbors and their friends. So I know it's a little bit deep for economic development coffee hour, but I think it's a really important thing to show that we do care a lot about this, and hopefully that assuages some of the concern.
Is it a short question? We're very past time here. I want to be sensitive to everyone's schedule.
Municipal building going in, what's the plans for the essentially 4 buildings that are no longer going to be needed if you're combining them? Are we going to take the existing Lothrop Street and tear it down and make it a field for the schools? Is that going to become a substation? The DPW barn, which is aged, is that going to be torn down and maybe create a new town office? Or
So that's a
what are the
really
options?
really big question. That's basically like what is going on type question. And just because of the time, I would say definitely we can take that question offline after this meeting, because the gentleman in the back actually it can outlay everything for you and show you what's going on. But I think it's we're 15 minutes past time now, and I know people have to get to work.
Well, when is the next full presentation? Is that tomorrow night? What day are we on?
We are doing facilities tours and forums on October 2nd at 6:30 at Lothrop Street Police Fire. If folks want to go, we have handouts here that have a website where all this stuff is, and we will be at NRT, we'll be at Fire Open House, and I'm gonna come talk to you as soon as this is over.
Okay, folks. Well, gosh, that was a lot of really great information. Thank you all for all that you do and for bringing up that information to us today. I would say, please get involved. Please go to the meetings. Don't go on Facebook and complain about something that's happening. If you haven't been involved in the process, you know, that's sort of going to sort of not be helpful for anyone. So please get involved, go to the meetings. Doesn't mean you have to think that you have to vote yes for everything or you have to vote no for everything, but please make informed choices, informed decisions. It's about the growth of Easton as a community for all of us as business owners, for residents, and for our children moving up, and for our aging population and everybody in between. So thank you all for coming today and giving us your time. And thank you for the panel. Thank you to Lisa for organising. And we'll hang around for a little bit if some of you have any other things to discuss.